kind of the progress that we've made on this project, give you some background information on it, and also the direction that the project is headed. So Adrian, if you can forward the slide. Oh, Jennifer, we have with us tonight Adrian Engel, who's on our consulting team with Barron Peers. He's responsible for a lot of the design work that we are pursuing on this project. And we also have Jennifer D'Onofrio, who's the city's bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. She is learning the background technology. And I'm Brian Abinat, senior transportation planner for the City of Davis and the Public Works Engineering and Transportation Department. I'm going to let Jennifer kind of explain what the meeting format is for tonight and kind of how it will flow, and then how we'll wrap up the meeting later on. So Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and explain the format?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to the meeting tonight. First, we're going to start out with the presentation done by Adrian and Brian. And then next, we're going to go into questions and comments. This is your opportunity to tell us what you think about the presentation, the design that we're looking at along Anderson Road. We're allowing folks 2 minutes to give their questions or comments. If you have more questions or comments outside of those 2 minutes, you can email Brian, and his email is at the bottom of the screen, babinat@cityofdavis.org. And in order to let me know that you would like to speak, I would ask you to, if you're on using Zoom, to raise your hand using the raise hand tool, or if you're on the phone, to push *9. So thank you.
Great, thanks Adrian. Can you advance the slide? Not showing up on my end.
Okay. It's advanced. It's just there's a little delay, it looks like.
There you go. All right. So Jennifer gave the broad framework for the evening, and I'm going to share with you what the actual kind of content of our presentation, how it's organized. So I'll first give an introduction and some background information for those who may not have been able to participate in the first recorded workshop and who might be just sort of just learning about this project now. We will then transition into the feedback that we heard from the recorded workshop, and also the survey that that accompanied that, and what those survey results were telling us. Also, then Adrian will share with you the design concept that we are that we're looking towards making on the corridor. After that, we'll move into kind of what the next steps in the process are and what the timing of this project might look like. And then finally, we will have opportunity for public comments with questions and answers. So Adrian, next slide. So a little bit of background. The purpose of this project is to improve overall safety and reduce conflicts between all modes of transportation on Anderson Road. It's a busy street. Lots of different users. There's buses, bicyclists, cars, and pedestrians. There's also elementary school that fronts onto Anderson Road, and the pickup and drop-off locations are on the street. So we really want to try to kind of organize this street a little bit better to improve safety and comfort for all different users. What we're looking at from a boundary for this project is roughly north of Villanova would be the northern boundary, and Amherst would be the southern boundary. A couple years ago, we finished a dedicated planning and outreach process that looked at the whole corridor from Russell to Covell, but we're focusing specifically on kind of this interior segment where we feel like there are significant challenges with safety concerns. And finally, the reason why we're looking at doing this now is there has been a long history of corridor safety concerns. There's been a lot of studying and planning efforts that have occurred for the corridor. There's also a joint interest between the city and the Davis School District to improve conditions for the Chavez pickup and drop off, circumstances. And then finally, every couple of years, federal grant funding cycles occur, and we are trying to position this project for grant funding. And the importance of this grant funding is that it leverages $9 in federal funds for every $1 that we contribute at the local level. So it really is important to take advantage of these funding sources when we have the opportunity in projects that can compete well. Adrian, next slide. Okay, so a little bit of background here about the kind of existing conditions on the corridor. The street carries about 11,000 cars a day under normal circumstances when UC Davis is in session and in a non-COVID environment. There's also over 2,000 bicyclists use Anderson Road on a daily basis as well. It's a very high volume corridor also for buses. So lots of different users, different modes in high volume. And one of the challenges that we have is that speeds are pretty high on the corridor, and that's one of the reasons that, one of the most common complaints we get about Anderson Road is that speeds are pretty high. Now, in this segment, the posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour, which is actually probably higher than we would like to see for a street that has residential homes and driveways fronting it. The average speed is 32 miles an hour, which is quite a bit higher than we would like to have in front of a elementary school. And the critical speed, which is kind of an engineering metric, is 36 miles per hour, and that's the speed at which 80% of drivers drive at or below. So those numbers are higher than we would like to see them, and we would like to try to address those speed concerns that we've heard and have been able to verify with speed surveys. We'd like to do that with this project. 10-year crash history indicates over 100 crashes. Many of those occur at Covell and Russell, but there is a proportional number of crashes that occur on the interior of Anderson Road as well, between those two intersections. 53% of those crashes involve bicyclists, and this corridor has the third highest rate of collisions in the city. So lots of challenges that we're trying to deal with, and hopefully we can make some progress towards improving with this project. Next advance. So I was going to look in a little bit closer at kind of the project area that we're looking at here specifically. Now, there's a hot spot at Villanova Drive where there is quite a few crashes that have occurred, disproportionate to the travel volumes that we see on that street or at that intersection. We also have Rutgers intersection, which is a well-known concern from both Chavez parents and caretakers of their students, as well as neighborhood residents. And then also that school frontage pickup and drop-off area on the west side is a problem area that we want to try to make improvements towards. Yes, Adrian? Just beyond those hot spots, but also within the project area, we have conflicts between bicycles and buses. So the red line represents buses and the green line represents bicyclists. Here we have buses pulling over to pick up or drop off passengers right on the curb in the southbound direction. They have to cross the bike lane in order to do that, and then that occurs again at the southern end of the project area along the entire corridor between Covell and Russell Boulevard. This happens 5 times. So ideally, what happens is during peak times is that you have this leapfrogging between bicyclists and buses. And really, we'd like to better organize that so that it's more comfortable for all users, including buses and bicyclists, as well as improves their safety. Advance, please. And then we have conflicts between cars and bicycles. Well, they're doing the same thing on the frontage of Cesar Chavez, where you have cars pulling in and out and needing to cross over and back from the bike lane in order to do that. And so these are conflicts that ideally we can correct so that the whole project area is better organized and functioning more safely for all the users. Adrian, next slide. Not slide, but just advance. There's other risk factors that contribute to kind of the complaints and the challenges that we're seeing on Anderson Road. It's a wide street, travel lanes are wide. These encourage those higher speeds that we referenced earlier that we'd like to see reduced. They also create long crossing distances for pedestrians or bicyclists that want to cross Anderson Road. This also impacts the amount of red time that cars have to wait for people to cross the street. Wide intersection, corner turning radius, when they're wide, as they are in today's environment, it does encourage higher vehicle speeds, making right-hand turns into and out of the cross streets. And we know that higher speeds are correlated with higher injury rates and fatality rates. The faster cars are traveling when they collide with a non-vehicular user. I mentioned earlier, single-family homes fronting the street. They need to be able to pull in and out of their driveway and have a level of safety in doing that. And then also there's a metric for bicycling called level of traffic stress, with 1 being the most comfortable conditions and 4 being the worst, most uncomfortable. And Anderson Road's about a level of traffic stress 3, and that really is only suitable for approximately 15% of the population. We really would like to make this street more accessible to a broader range of bicycle user types or inabilities. Adrian, next slide, please. I mentioned before, there's been a lot of studies and planning efforts for Anderson Road over history. Just looking back the last 7 or 8 years, our Safe Routes to School program had completed what's called a walk bike audit report for all of our elementary schools, including Chavez. The output of that study were recommended safety improvements for walking and bicycling to school near Chavez Elementary School. We then took those recommendations and applied for grant funding to design and construct those back in 2015. That project wasn't funded, and so we went back to our city council, asked for some funding to do a more kind of comprehensive planning and outreach process, which completed in 2018 and resulted in kind of establishing a long-term street design vision for the corridor, which we are building off of and putting towards a potential first phase construction project, which is what we're trying to share with you this evening for grant funding. So that's where we are today, and that's sort of the recent history on Anderson Road from a planning and studying standpoint. Adrian, next slide. I mentioned at the beginning that we had a recorded workshop back in late July, early August, and a survey. And what we heard from the survey results from that first workshop was that 67, about 2/3 of the survey respondents felt that it was either very or extremely important to improve safety on Anderson Road, which was, a good sign that we had picked a corridor that has a need there. Also, there was an interest in making sure that we can, not worsen in traffic congestion that occurs on the street, and to, maintain or improve operations along the street. Also, to limit the number of raised buffered islands at the intersection to the extent that we can, particularly at Rutgers and Villanova Drive. So we took that into consideration. We do know that maintaining or expanding school-related parking is an important piece of this project, both to make sure that the school isn't negatively impacted by reduced parking supply, and also that those potential parking impacts don't spill into the adjacent neighborhood. It was important to improve walking and bicycling access to the school to reduce demand for driving. We do know that some folks whose children attend Chavez don't walk or bike to school because they don't feel comfortable or safe doing that. So we want to try to improve on that. And then finally, over half of the respondents shared with us that they felt like the project was headed in the right direction. This is generally a good sign, because with projects like this, we typically get a third who say that the project is headed in the right direction, a third who say it's not, and a third who aren't sure. So we do feel like, based on that response, we're moving in the right direction. Of course, we look to hear from folks on this webinar as well at the conclusion here, and solicit your thoughts. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrian, who's going to share with you some of the design features that we're currently exploring, and to help you, better understand and visualize what that looks like and how they can affect traffic circulation as well. So Adrian, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Brian. So what we've completed is a very high-level conceptual design of the improvements along Anderson Road, basically from just north of Villanova Drive to the south end of the school and the park. And with this, we are showing new lane configurations and some intersection modifications, but really at a sort of conceptual planning level. And there are going to be some design details that will be worked out when the final design happens. So to take that to heart as we're looking at some of these details. A few points first on the north end of the project. It's consistent with both designs, or concept 1 and 2. And there's three main things that we've been trying to accomplish with these improvements at this north end. The first is currently Anderson Drive drops from 4 lanes down to 2 just south of Villanova Drive today. And there's a lot of merge and issues just north of the school frontage, as well as we think this contributes to some of the collision history that we see at Villanova Drive. So as part of the project, we're proposing to move the existing lane merge that happens just south of Villanova to just south of Radcliffe to the north. So lengthening that distance where that lane merge can happen further away from the school and simplify the intersection quite a bit. With that reduction in the number of traveled lanes in this section right here, it gives us the opportunity to also create some bus boarding islands. So you'll notice the red pavement markings that are highlighting a bus loading zone or a bus lane where buses can pull over, pick up and drop off passengers. And it's a floating boarding island so that the bikeway that's heading north-south on Anderson will travel behind that boarding island to try to limit the number of conflicts, as Brian mentioned, between the leapfrogging bicycles and buses that are using the corridor, and keeping them separated so they're not fighting each other for that curb space. In addition, we've also are proposing some low-impact corner treatments at Villanova Drive and Anderson Road. We're looking at some protected intersection type features, but unlike some of the protected intersections that have been developed in the city of Davis in the last few years, these would be on a more temporary basis, done with surface treatments like paint and plastic delineators as a trial basis to see how the protected intersection treatments operate here and can be used as a pilot project. And then when the Anderson Road Complete Streets project that was discussed earlier that looks at the entire length, they can revisit the intersection here as well as other locations and take the lessons learned from this application and create those intersection treatments here as well as other places along the corridor. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to do some dry runs on some of these treatments. Some of the big takeaways, though, is it helps separate some of the turning conflicts between bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles, allowing right turning and left turning vehicles to yield to people trying to cross the street where there is overlap on the signal phasing. With that, though, as we move further south along the corridor, the two concepts do diverge, and we have two different options we're presenting at the meeting tonight. The first option, concept number one, looks at maintaining the current operations for the school pickup and drop off. And this is utilizing the western curb on Anderson Road. The difference here that we're proposing is to actually create a separated bikeway, a class 4 facility that moves the bikeway closer to the curb instead of the typical class 2 bike lane that's floating out between the parking and the traveled way. So this way we would remove a lot of those conflicts where the cars are pulling in and out of that loading zone and conflicting with bicycles today. And I have some videos of some operations analysis we've done a little bit later that can highlight that conflict. With this option, though, there is a remaining conflict, though, that is not mitigated, and that is as the kids and parents are getting out of the cars to get to the school frontage, they do have to walk across the bikeway, and so that there is some caution that will be needed there. Everybody need to have their heads up, and bikes be cognizant of the presence of pedestrians in that location. In addition to the separated bikeway and loading zone treatments, we're also making some proposed improvements at the Rutgers Drive intersection with some enhanced crossing with a pedestrian refuge to significantly shorten the crossing on the north side of Rutgers, as well as some corner radius reductions and potential bulb outs that will help slow turning vehicles that are turning on and off of Rutgers Drive at this location here. At the same location, we've created some additional cross sections that show the dimensions of both the traveled lanes, the bikeways. A couple things I would like to highlight is on the southbound direction, that loading zone has both buffers between the bikeway and the parked cars, so that there's a door zone for the kids and parents opening the car doors towards the bikeway. But we also thought it was important to have that same door zone buffer on the travel side as well to allow parents or kids to get out on the driver's side just as safely and not be worrying about the traffic that's moving by at that location. So definitely widening that space, making it easier for people to get in and out of their cars safely. And then also, you'll notice that on the northbound direction, the parking is remaining against the curb in this location, and we're maintaining class 2 bike lanes with a small buffer on the travel side as we can. And this is really to try to preserve all of the, or as much as possible, of the on-street parking where there are existing residents along the corridor. So trying to allow homeowners and guests of those homes to be able to park in front of those homes up against the curb still, with those bike lanes being more traditional, even though we are keeping the width per Davis standards and including a buffer where possible. The second concept varies the drop-off location significantly from concept number 1. In concept number 2, we're actually creating the pickup drop-off zone on the school campus away from Anderson Road itself. To be able to accomplish that, there's a few things that we've done. First, we've opened up a new west leg of the Rutgers Drive intersection. At that signal now, you'll be able to enter the Chavez School parking lot. The parking lot operations would be southbound only. There'd be staff parking along the curb, along the sidewalk of Anderson, and then the drop-off zone would be right up against the school frontage on the west side of that parking lot area. And then all of the vehicles would exit the parking lot at the southern driveway to be able to get back onto Anderson Road. The idea is to try to maintain that one-way operation to increase efficiency and make it very easy and safe for the kids to get dropped off at school without impacting a lot of the traffic and bikeway conditions that we see today. With this option, we have maintained the separated bikeway along the school frontage. There would be some sort of neighborhood permit system for staff and teacher parking along this frontage as well, but it would create that protected bikeway along the school frontage with the parked cars there. And in the northbound direction, similar treatments that we saw from concept number 1 with the class 2 buffered bike lane and the on-street parking up against the curb. A couple other things I'll point out. One, with this option, we are providing a northbound left turn pocket that doesn't exist today. And this really helps separate some of the conflicting movements for turning vehicles with both bicycles and pedestrians. And in the southbound direction, you'll notice that there's a right turn pocket as well to get into the school parking lot, with the bikeway on the right side of that, which is non-conventional, but we're proposing to put out a bike signal to separate those movements. So a majority of the day when school isn't being accessed, northbound and southbound vehicles and bikes can operate simultaneously. Right turning vehicles would have to wait for a cycle and be able to get their own signal phase to be able to separate those conflicts out. And again, we have some animations that will show how that will function. The one last thing I'll notice or mention about the Rutgers Drive intersection at this point, we're also proposing a pedestrian scramble phase where the pedestrians will be able to cross all four legs simultaneously, again, trying to limit their conflict with the turning vehicles, especially during those pickup and drop off times where many of the parents today are still using Rutgers Drive to park, get out and walk their kids to school. And so maintaining those safe crossings is going to be important, as well as for neighborhood connectivity for both kids walking and riding from their homes. Again, here are some cross sections for the area just south of Rutgers. Some highlights for this, you'll notice that there's angled parking within the school frontage area. Again, this is to help maintain that orientation, the southbound orientation for the parking lot. And you'll also notice that the travel side buffer for the on-street parking along the frontage of the school has gone away as well for a portion of this area, and that's to accommodate that northbound left turn pocket. So slightly different than concept number one there as well. I've already talked through both of the intersections individually, but here they are side by side for concept number one and concept number two. You can see how concept number one shortens the crossing distance for the north leg of the intersection for both bicycles and pedestrians to be able to get across Anderson more quickly and safely. And then concept number two, highlighting that bicycle signal and some of the other turn lane features that will help get the bikes and cars in and out of the campus efficiently and safely as well. Here are we've created some renderings from an isometric view to look at how the school looks today. Here's the sort of Google view of what the school frontage looks with the on-street or the staff parking all loaded today. Again, this Google image was not taken during pickup drop-off, as there's no cars parked on the curb space. And again, UC Davis was probably already in session or between classes right here, because you don't see a lot of bikes going southbound as well. But as we start looking at concept number one, you can start seeing some of the changes. In this location, you can see the pickup drop-off area closer to the southbound traveled lane, with those bikes being in between the parked cars and the sidewalk, minimizing their conflicts with the faster moving vehicles and the buses that are using the corridor in high volumes, as Brian mentioned. With this option, you can also see some of the intersection improvements at Rutgers with the pedestrian refuge as well. Concept number two, same vantage point. Again, the separated bikeway between the curb and the staff parking on street, as well as the diagonal parking within the school frontage and the pickup drop-off zone happening at the very bottom of the screen, where the red and black car are, to show where kids are getting in and out to access the school more effectively. In this location too, you can also see the expanded Rutgers intersection that shows that west leg access point into the parking lot. So with these different scenarios, we did create a visual simulation using traffic operations software that shows both the existing conditions as well as the two concepts to highlight some of the potential conflicts. So assuming you can see the video being shared, you can see here cars pulling in and out of the curb today, with the bicyclists going southbound closer to the center line of the road, as well as the buses and other vehicles using the corridor, with the conflicts that happen regularly today, and really the catalyst for the project at this location. As we look at the next slide, this shows concept number one with those same vehicles operating. Now, though, the bicyclists are using the separated bikeway, so they're removed from the conflict of the cars pulling in and out of the loading zone. What's not shown very clearly here, though, is they will have pedestrians that are crossing that bikeway to get onto the sidewalk, onto the campus. You can see them using the crosswalk, but they would be in that bikeway zone as well. And then finally, with concept number 2, the vantage changes slightly, so you can see the pickup and drop-off area. But in this location, imagine that the staff parking is loaded out in the street as well as in the diagonal spots. All of the pickup and drop-off activities are happening on the curb up against the school frontage. And all of the bikes, really only conflict that they're going to have to navigate is the driveway at the south end of the parking lot as the cars are exiting. So a much more simplified version, reducing a lot of the conflicts from the existing condition as well as some of them from concept number 1 as well. We also looked at some other visualizations from the vantage point of the user along the corridor. This was a typical sort of pre-COVID condition during the drop-off time in the morning. And you can see the cars trying to pull in and out of the parking lot or in and out of the parking along the curb face, blocking the bikeway with the other southbound vehicles having to go around those cars pulling in and out to be able to get further south on Anderson. With concept number 1, you still may have some of those conflicts with the cars trying to pull in and out with the southbound vehicles, but the bikes that are traveling southbound have a much cleaner shot going down the corridor and have a much safer trip, not having to dodge the vehicles pulling in and out or the vehicles traveling around the vehicles as well. And this location shows some of the opportunity areas we have with the pedestrian refuge for either the pavement treatments or some additional landscaping that could be accomplished within the final design of the project as well. And then with concept number 2, showing the new driveway into the César Chávez Elementary parking lot to the north end, and really a reduction in the amount of conflicts during the pickup and drop-off time, because all of the staff parking will already be loaded before that hour happens, as staff gets to the school before the kids do, and then all of that pickup drop-off happening on campus away from the southbound vehicles. And then finally, we have 2 intersection animations that show some of the operational benefits. And you'll see here the southbound right turn pocket was able to happen when the bicyclists had a red light in the southbound direction. Scramble phase for pedestrians to be able to get across. And then you'll see here in just a minute that the southbound bikes and the southbound cars will go at the same time, holding those right turning southbound cars to keep that those 2 movements isolated from each other to make it safer. And then finally, we ran an animation at Villanova Drive, or simulation at Villanova Drive and Anderson Road as well, showing how the operations would happen with a tighter intersection at this location, with the lane merged to move further north at this location. What we've noticed is there's not a depreciable difference in the operations and delay that's happening with this concept. There's a little bit more queuing that happens today, but it's appreciably the same, but you do get the benefits of having some separated bikeway facilities as well as those bus boarding islands that will help keep separate movements for the buses and the bikes going in both directions. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Brian, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the outreach today.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I appreciate you going through those design concepts and the simulations. I think that's helpful so that folks can really visualize exactly what the potential effects would be from these design changes. I just wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit to share with folks what some of the outreach has been to date on this project, as well as what's coming up. So back prior to 2020, I had mentioned the Walk Bike Audit Report study, the SACOG grant application and outreach that occurred with that. And we went through 6 to 9 month planning and outreach process for the corridor. Back in July and August, we had a recorded workshop and survey, like I mentioned earlier. In September, just a week or so ago, we did bring the project to the Recreation and Park Commission, because that concept 2 that Adrian was showing we're showing you does result in a reduction in parking in the parking lot for the faculty and staff, which is not fully recovered with the dedicated on-street parking for them. So what we were looking to do, or proposing to do, is to recover some of that parking in Redwood Park immediately adjacent to the south driveway on the Chavez campus. And by doing that, we would be able to recover all of the parking that would be otherwise lost to concept number 2. And then, of course, today we have the live workshop that we're presenting today. And Adrian, next slide. Slow on my end. Next steps, so in October, on the 8th, we will bring this project to the Bicycling Transportation Street Safety Commission for their input on the project and its design. And then we'll also be going to City Council to check in with them to make sure they're comfortable with the direction that this project is headed and give their final support for submitting the grant application in December. Now, if this project is awarded funding, we likely would begin final engineering and design for this project in late spring, summer, fall. Kind of depends on how things materialize. There will be another series of community outreach as we get closer to a final design, and also diving into some more of the specifics, which we have not attempted to do at this stage, because we're really trying to address some of the key assumptions and key design features for the project. In either circumstance, we probably would not begin construction before summer of 22, just the way that the timing of these things works out in avoiding construction during the school year. Next up. I'm sorry, next slide. Go on my end again.
We can blame Comcast.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm the project manager. If you have comments or questions that we weren't able to discuss or address at today's workshop, feel free to send them to me by email at my email address below. There's also a project website. We'll keep that regularly updated. So you can refer to that project website as well. Next slide. And finally, that concludes our formal presentation for this item. And Jennifer, we will transition into your questions and comments. I do see that we already have one hand up for somebody who would like to speak. Jennifer will go through the ground rules and take it away.
Thank you. Just a note on this slide, it says Mace Commons 30 at cityofdavis.org. Just a note that it's actually going to be babinet at cityofdavis.org. So if you would like to have a question or make a comment, please raise your hand to let me know that you would like to speak. So what we're going to do is we'll ask people to, if they have a question, say their question first. And if you have a comment, and you're over the 2 minutes, it's a great opportunity for you to email Brian at his email address and let him know what your comment is, because that information will also get included in the list of comments that we're going to be receiving today. All right, so first we have Jeremy who would like to talk. Go for it, Jeremy.
This is actually Bronwyn and Jeremy together. We're a team. Two questions. The first is, have you assumed the same amount of stop time for drop-off on both option 1 and option 2? Because as a parent, it seems to me that dropping off on option 1 would take considerably longer if you had to then get out the car and make sure your kid was crossing the bike lane. Whereas option 2, you could drop and go a little bit more easily. So that would be my first question. And my second question is my husband's. So you just jump in there.
What interactions are there with the MPR construction. I saw some provisions there for the new road there for the back, but also would those two construction sequences interfere with each other? Would you be shutting down Anderson just when you need to be moving a lot of material into the MPR?
Great question. We actually have David Burke on the line today, and maybe he might be able to talk a little bit about your question too. And then Adrian, are you able to handle one when we're ready?
Yep.
Cool. All right, David, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm David Burke. I'm Executive Director of Capital Improvements for the Davis Joint Unified School District. So regarding the question, the multipurpose room project is now going to be located on the north side of the campus. So we will be making some improvements to the existing walkway path that goes across the north side of the Chavez campus. The construction duration for the multipurpose room is going to last approximately a year and start in the summer, late spring, early summer of 2021, and be concluding during the summer of 2022. And that's when Brian said that we're looking for the Anderson Road improvements to start. So I think the relationship between the two projects will work out just fine.
Great, thank you.
And the answer to the first question was yes, we have assumed shorter dwell times for concept number 2, where parents can pull right up to the school frontage, open their door, shove their kids out, and be able to get to work. So I have little ones, and I know the exact habit. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, anyone else have a question or comment? All right, Cecilia. All right. Take the floor.
Okay, hi there.
Hi.
I'm Savannah, and I live on Anderson, just north of Villanova. And so I'm familiar with all of the speeding there that takes place. And that's my major concern. And I noticed that you mentioned that earlier in your presentation. And the thing I'm concerned about is that lane merge. When I've been in that lane merge, a couple of times people have been speeding southbound and almost crashed into my car, even though, you know, I was going at the speed limit. And I'm concerned that if you move it back up towards, I think you put it on the block before, that it's just gonna move the accidents back there. I think it's, you know, people who aren't familiar with that street, maybe students or people new to Davis. And I'm wondering if you might consider moving it back to Radcliffe, I think, and having a stop sign there, and then that lane ends right there. So moving southbound after Radcliffe, there's only one lane all the way down. That's just a suggestion for you to consider, because I just think that it's just gonna, the speeding is gonna continue to where the lane merges.
Great, thank you very much. All right, Patricia.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Patricia. I live on Stanford Drive, so I'm about 4 blocks from the project site. And first, I want to really applaud you for all the public outreach that you've done on this project. And I want to say that I really like the overall concept, which to me seems that you're really making the bikes and pedestrians the priority in these 2 blocks right near the school, and slowing the cars down by having fewer lanes for the cars. I think the buffered bike lanes where the bikes are over adjacent to the curb is the most important safety improvement. I think the transit boarding islands look like that's a really good way to handle the bus stops. I think the Rudger Road improvements look like really good safety improvements there. I think if you have to go with concept 1, then it looked like the project area 4 had some better ideas, but I really hope that you can go with concept 2. I don't know if it's a funding issue of why you wouldn't potentially be able to do concept 2, but concept 2 seems to be just an immense improvement in safety for dropping the kids off on the school site itself, and then kind of buffering the bikes by having that teacher parking out in the street itself. So thank you, that's my input.
Thank you very much. Next we have Aquacina. If I said that wrong, I'm sorry.
No, that you said it right.
Yay!
So I live on Radcliffe, west of Anderson. And I want to second what somebody said about moving the merge north, and I would move it even north of Radcliffe. I cross that intersection. I cross Anderson almost every day walking my dog, and the cars are coming really fast by that point. I really feel almost it's dangerous at that intersection. I talked to the mayor at one point and he put up some temporary signs saying to slow down, but somebody knocked it over within a week. So people are really coming fast north of Radcliffe from Russell. No, not from Russell, from Covell. So that would be one recommendation, is that I would move the merge further north to slow the traffic down. And a stop sign would be terrific at Radcliffe, or a stoplight. I've often thought that that was kind of a long stretch, but that's my, my experience based on living here, and also my daughters crossing on their bikes to go to the high school was always very dangerous. So I never felt good about that intersection. So all the kids that are coming from the west are going through that intersection with cars zipping by. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, you know, Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, that point's well taken. I think that some of the ideas about, you know, transitioning the merge further north than where we are already proposing to do it are potential options if there's, you know, enough interest from the community. Essentially what we're doing is putting the northern section of the street on a road diet, and even though our project area is, you know, defined between Villanova and Amherst, it's conceivable that it could be extended, you know, during our, you know, design phase if the project is funded to do that. But that is you know, a pretty significant extension of the project area and would definitely add to the cost. And if we're looking at making intersection improvements to Radcliffe and or a traffic signal, those types of improvements might need to wait until a future project phase where we can address that segment between Villanova and Covell kind of more holistically rather than doing just a couple of things.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions or comments they would like to ask? Oh. Aquacina, I will open it up to you again.
If I can ask a follow-up question. So without the intersection traffic light or stop sign, would it be more expensive to move the merger north? Because what I'm thinking is that traffic is coming really fast on that northern stretch. So if you slow it down one more block, I think it will be safer at César Chávez.
No, the answer is I think it depends. Adrian would know better than I would what the cost implications for that are. It seems like it could be kind of a striping, a marking kind of thing, but the whole project area, as we've defined it, would undergo kind of a slurry sealed coating, and that would need to be extended north too. So it wouldn't be a trivial expense to add, but it also wouldn't be, you know, insurmountable either. Adrian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would say the only thing at this point is we haven't done any of the operations analysis with that included. So there may be some unintended consequences we're not thinking about right now. But I do know, Brian, with your original project that looked at from Covell all the way down to Russell, there's an opportunity to take whatever improvements get done in this first phase and extend them both north and south to great benefit for the whole community. So I think that defining this first phase of project will really be tailored on the amount of funding that's available.
Great. All right. Next speaker is going to be Eric.
Yes, I just have a quick question. Are there going to be things going on at the new multi-purpose room during, let's say, the middle of the day that some of the parents might come to see their kids in them and that sort of thing? And if so, then where are those people going to park?
David, do you want to answer sort of the activity programming for the NPR, and then I can address the parking issue?
Yeah, Eric, could you restate your question? I want to make sure I understand it correctly.
If we're eventually going to have a new multi-purpose room in the north part of the campus. And what I was wondering was if indeed there were programs or something held during the week when the teachers are there and whatnot, and the kids are involved, but the parents want to come and see them, how much parking will be available? I'll call it extra parking would be available for vehicles of the parents to come and see what was going on in the middle of the day.
Okay, I understand your question. Thank you, Eric. I was curious whether it was a course of construction question, but your question regards the building once it's complete and functional. So during the school day, it's my expectation that all of the existing parking will be full with staff parking. So there really is not going to be much accommodation for visitor or parent parking during the school day. So I think that parking would have to go out to the street. Now, if it's opposite school hours, then there would be some parking available reasonably, because you would think staff would not be there in the numbers that they're there during the school day.
And I had mentioned on one of the slides that that with concept 2, there is a net reduction in the total amount of parking available if we don't convert the turf immediately adjacent to the south driveway at Chavez into perpendicular parking, which we're proposing to do with this project. When we convert that turf to parking, we could end up with a net increase of around potentially 4 to 5 spaces. So we wouldn't be any worse off than we are today. We might have a few extra spaces, but other than that, conditions would be generally the same.
Right. Eric, do you feel like that answered your question?
Yes, but the but is if you begin to try to park around the school, you'll find that there's all those parking restrictions on all the streets, and there's basically practically nowhere in the neighborhood that you can park. And this isn't part of this, but I'll extend it further. Right now there's between 17 and 21 cars that park on the western side of Anderson Road headed down toward 8th Street and whatever, and they're picking up a commuter vehicle to, I guess, take them on to either the Med Center over in Sac or off toward the Bay Area. I don't really know, but sometime that's got to be considered too, because all those people, if things are changed, would also try to get into those areas that don't have any permitted parking.
Good. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a fair point. There are a couple of ways that we can address that. We're also aware that some students or faculty at UC Davis will park on Anderson Road and then pick up the Unitrans bus and go onto campus to avoid having to pay on campus parking fees. There are ways that we can get around that, which we might be able to discuss in more detail as we get into final design if the project is funded. And one of those ways to do that is to kind of make it time restricted parking, 90 minutes or so, to give people enough time to have access to parking to go onto the school campus during the day when needed, so that parking is available to them and not occupied by folks who are trying to park all day on Anderson Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else would like to speak? Oh, Steve, go for it. You have to unmute. I'll unmute you. There you go. We can hear you.
Two things. Will Unitrans and Yellow Bus be adding any bus stops on this stretch?
It's too soon to tell at this point. There's 5 currently on the corridor. Whether or not they feel like there's a demand or a need to add additional bus stops is sort of an operational issue for them. They haven't indicated a desire to do so to date within the project area that we've defined for this first phase.
Secondly, my son's a wheelchair user, and could you describe the width of the landing and how somebody with mobility aid can board the buses?
Yeah, so typically a bus boarding island is 8 to 9 feet deep or wide, where the buses pick up and drop off. And then there'll be an ADA path from the boarding island to the adjacent sidewalk. And we haven't designed it yet. I mean, there's a lot of different details and ways that can be done. It could be done with a curb ramp down into the bikeway and then back up onto the sidewalk. But there's also boarding island designs where the pedestrian crossing between the boarding island and the sidewalk is actually is raised, and it's the same level as the sidewalk and boarding island, and the bikes have to go up and over, and that vertical change helps slow bikes down as well and make them be aware of that pedestrian crossing. So there's different ways that it can be accommodated, but there are really strict requirements that have to be met for bus drop-off areas, especially related to wheelchair pickup and drop-off.
Thanks, Adrian.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Anyone else? All right. Last chance. Oh, Patricia, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I would just comment that I thought that the way you illustrated the concepts was very well done. The way that you had the kind of simple, these movement drawings where the cars were moving, and I felt like I could really understand the concepts of what were proposed in the way that you presented it tonight. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that method of trying to show us how it was actually going to work.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. We appreciate that comment. It's a struggle. There is an investment that we have to put into doing that for a project that's speculative and may not ultimately be funded. But at some point, we would want to be able to move forward with this project. And it's important that people can feel like they understand what we're proposing rather than conjuring up images in their own mind about what the effects of the project will be. So I think it's, money that's well invested, because I do think it gives a level of comfort to the community to know, visually what we're proposing rather than just to be looking down at some, lines on a piece of paper. So I appreciate the comments well taken.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still muted. Yeah, yes, I agree. I think it was very easy to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, anyone else with any questions before we close out the meeting? All right.
Oh, if not, I'll just wrap this up by thanking everybody for taking the time to walk through this presentation with us and to share with us your thoughts. We definitely appreciate it. Like I said, there will be additional opportunities for comments if something emerges in your thoughts that you'd like to share. You can do so at the Bicycling, Transportation and Street Safety Commission meeting on October 8th. It'll be a similar format to this and similar presentation. And then also stay tuned for a city council meeting if you want to stay plugged into it as well. And finally, as I mentioned, there is a project website. We'll keep that updated with information so that you can always stay apprised of how the project is developing. So thanks again, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time with us, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.